What I'm about to share now, it wasn't funny then, but now looking at it, I laugh and it's really funny because as an activist, we go through all kinds of things. So, like 10 years ago, I was supposed to go to San Salvador in El Salvador. My colleagues in Mozambique were supposed to book the tickets and they gave the agent to do that. I don't know what happened. The agent ended booking my ticket to go to Salvador in Brazil. And I only discovered that when I got to South Africa, when I figured out because I was transiting from Nigeria to South Africa, then South Africa to Brazil, then Brazil to El Salvador. This was only discovered when I landed in South Africa because my colleagues eventually found out that, this ticket they gave me was the wrong one. It wasn't funny. And then we started the process of changing the ticket and all that. And then I now ended up in Sao Paulo and I was stuck in the airport for 3 days. 3 days. It wasn't funny, but looking at it now, I laugh. How on earth would I be going to San Salvador in El Salvador and I was headed to San Salvador in Brazil? But that's the life of an activist. So it wasn't funny then, but it is funny now.
The story that comes close to mind is there was like this TED Talk kind of event. And it was, I think it was called Change Food or something. And it was invited by like the New York Times, hosted by the New York Times at the office and headquarters in New York City, right? And so I show up and I have my 15-minute talk, and it was like 2 days after the election, the first election of Donald Trump. And I think everybody was feeling this emotional volatility, this fear, this like, couldn't even believe that this happened. Like, and so in that kind of emotional turbulence, when I went on stage, I started talking and I just freestyled, even though you had to pitch your talk and do rehearsals with the staff and the coordination where they would give you feedback, and I had slides. And I went up there and I started talking and I just went and like blacked out and talked for 2 minutes, and then I opened my eyes and there was all these people clapping and singing, and I realized that I didn't do my talk and I didn't even do any of the slides that I had prepared, and I was so upset, but it went fine, and I can laugh about it now because it didn't mean it.
2 incidents, somehow interrelated, happened to me in the 90s. It wasn't funny, but today when I look back, I just chuckle. One was after I'd been released from detention and I had to travel with a group of friends, other activists in the United States, with somebody from the US Embassy accompanying us. Then we got to the airport in Lagos. We passed all the checks and so on. But when we got close to the immigration, where they would finally check, whether you're a wanted person and so on, everybody stayed 1 mile away from me because they didn't want to be connected to me. They wanted, if I was going to be arrested, I should be arrested and they didn't want to have anything about it. I passed through, there was no problem. Now I look back at the whole incident and I just chuckle and laugh. Second incident also happened at the airport in Lagos. I came back from a foreign trip, then got to immigration again. Immigration, always problematic in those days and even now. And the official took my passport, looked at his computers and delayed for a while. So I asked him, what is the problem? I can tell you how my name has been removed from the wanted list, from the stop list. The man looked at me and said, your name has been restored to the stop list. And I just gave up. That ate me some days behind bars. But I look back at it today, what funny days we passed through in those days.
The story I want to share that actually wasn't quite funny at the time when it happened, but looking back right now, it's actually hilarious. This was in 2020, October 2020, during the NSAS protests in Nigeria. This was young Nigerians that poured out into the streets protesting police brutality, and I joined them. This was a Saturday afternoon, and we'd marched to the police headquarters, and we're singing and we're chanting, and we'd established this rhythm with the police officers who were trying to disperse us. They would come with their water trucks, they would spray water, they would throw tear gas, we would run, and and then they would stop chasing us, and then we would regroup, and then of course we will march back to the police headquarters. But this particular time, as I was running away from this police truck, and the policemen on foot chasing us, I suddenly realized as I looked back, they didn't stop coming. They just kept going. And this time around, it just dawned on me that this wasn't the same situation, and I just kept running and running and running, and I was running at full speed, like literally as fast as my legs could carry me, and it just appeared that they were gaining on us, and just as I was about to run out of breath, I looked and I saw Unity Park, and I saw a group of protesters there. But unfortunately, as I ran into Unity Park, I realized that it was a mistake, because there those protesters were actually anti-protesters and they were waiting for us to beat us up. I just didn't know where strength came from. I escaped one or two people that were trying to grab me. I ran across the street, and somehow I was able to find a taxi and ran into it and told the driver, just move. That's how I was able to escape that situation. It was not funny at the time, believe me, because I believed I was running for my life. But looking back, it's actually hilarious. It's just one of those experiences that you look back and say, this is what it took to fight for justice in Nigeria.
I have a story that was not funny then, but is kind of funny now, and I look back on for a lot of lessons as an organizer. So this is a long time ago. So I was quite a bit younger. I was in my early 20s, and I was a student organizer, and had already organized several successful actions, including a hunger strike and a lot of anti-war organizing actions. And I decided to organize, and I'm going to put organizing in quotation marks, a mass march of students from Davis to the state capitol in Sacramento, about 20 miles away. And when the day came for this mass march, rally and march to Sacramento, with a route mapped and everything organized, exactly one other person showed up. So there were two of us. And at the time, it was not funny. But we realized that we did not have a critical mass of people for a mass march, and definitely not one that was 20 miles, and definitely not one that was going to the state capitol. So instead, we went to a local restaurant and had breakfast. I look back on that now, and I realize what the hell made us think that any students were going to wake up at 4 in the morning to march 20 miles. What on earth made us think that just having the idea and putting up some flyers and telling our friends was going to lead to a mass mobilization? There are so many things I look back on now as like smart lessons, and also what the hell was I thinking? So I can laugh about it now.
There was this experience I had in Addis Ababa a year or 2 years ago. I was out there for United Nations Environmental Summit. I was initially in town, in a hotel in town, in an accommodation in town. But because of the long distance to commute to the center, we had to move to an accommodation, a paid accommodation just in the center. But I just got there with some friends that I knew and colleagues, and I was just settling in and just resting. I removed my clothes and just wanted to just rest. And then I heard a bang on my door. Bam, 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 bam. It was so scary. Bam, 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 bam. I opened the door. I just took my shirt and wore a t-shirt and opened the door. And I saw about 6 to 7 soldiers at my door. I was immediately scared of what's going on. I tried to ask, what's happening? And no one is answering. What's happening? Nobody's answering me. It was all I heard was, get out, get out, get out now, get out now. I locked my door and stepped out, and by the time I got down, I was on the 6th floor of several story building, like different stories, like they were up to like 10 or 15 stories. And I got down to the last floor, to the reception, hoping to find someone to talk to. I did not find any soul, not one person, except for the soldiers that are going about shouting, come down. I tried to ask a question. Then I tried to connect to the internet so that I can call one of our senior colleagues who was with me. I tried and tried. Luckily, I was able to connect to him. He came down too, and it was just the two of us in the entire building. I mean, hundreds of rooms in apartments, hundreds, and just the two of us. So we tried to ask people. No one, the soldiers were not coming forth, and we had to walk distance to meet others sent to stay somewhere. And then we got to find out that it was a bomb. There was a bomb threat. Then it was very, very scary. But looking at it now, I just laughed over it and felt like this was a case of a language barrier.
The past 8 years, something happened in my activism journey that was not funny at all at that time, but today I can look back and smile. As an activist, we often speak about impact and change, but we rarely talk about the personal cost. I was deeply, deeply committed to advancing agroecology, food sovereignty, climate change action, and responding to the climate crisis. And my work required frequent travel, and still requires frequent travel within the country, regionally and globally. What I did not realize was that some people, sadly, even within my own circles, misinterpreted that commitment. Allegations were made that I was neglecting my family because of my work. Without my knowledge, the situation escalated. I was arrested and spent a night in jail. That was in 2019. My daughter was taken to a children's home based on claims that my activism meant I was not present as a parent and as a mother. It was one of the most painful and confusing moments of my life. What followed, great people, was 3 long years of going in and out of court, defending myself against accusations that were not true. But even in that season, I did not give up. I held on to my purpose. Yes, continued my activism and trusted that the truth would prevail. Eventually, the case was dismissed, and due to lack of evidence, justice came, but the journey was not easy.
The first time I found myself in Senegal and I could not speak French. It was so funny. Taking taxi from one place to the other was a challenge because you have to struggle to explain to the taxi driver where you are going to, and also coming back to the hotel. I remember we had to go to the pharmacy to get some medicine for somebody who was not feeling very fine, and we had to struggle to explain to the person what is wrong with my colleague and the kind of medicine that we wanted. I think the peak was when we went to take dinner one evening, and then they served us. We could only say rice and chicken, and then they brought this chicken, and we saw blood in the chicken, and we said, "Oh,
God
this
have
chicken
mercy
is not
upon us."
done. Go and cook it again." And the person was like, speaking in French, and we didn't understand what she was saying, but we kept saying, "It's not done, it's not done, go and cook it again." So they had to take it back. We don't know whether they cooked it or not, but they brought it back and it was still like fresh with blood. But anyway, we ate it like that. We did not enjoy it, and it was awful. So after that experience, we spent 1 week there. So each time we want to go out, we had to look for somebody who can speak both English and French to take us out so that we'll be able to communicate with the people. And my own worst experience was that we were paired up in the room, and my roommate was from Francophone, and then me Anglophone. It was difficult communicating, but then it was also fun. It became fun within the 1 week. And that was it. And that's part of what we experienced doing this work.
Quite a number of things happened to some of us activists then that when you look back today, you laugh about. I'll quickly share two. Those relate with the impact of our work, which was global, vis-a-vis where we were working there, which were like a very tiny, no equipment kind of office. By 2009, working with Environmental Rights Action, we won the Bloomberg Global Tobacco Control Award. And as preparation to that award, which held in India, they were supposed to do a recording of 3 minutes recording of our work from where we work. Apparently, the Bloomberg team contracted a production company in the US. The production company somehow scrambled in Nigeria looking for the best production company, and then they picked Tajuddin Awokpetu. For those who don't know him, he's a big media owner, huge production company, owns several TVs, owns several radio stations in Nigeria. And the day he came now to do the recording, why that tiny office in Balogun in Ikeja, and he came with this very sleek Mercedes-Benz, a bus full of TV crew members, and then another truck that was filled with equipment. Tajuddin walked up into our office, climbed up. It's a 3-story building, and he was just looking around. He couldn't believe that he was contracted to come and take somebody like myself. So he walked down, apparently to call again to confirm that I was in the right place. And then he came up, and then they decided that, okay, can they just use their lowest equipment? They brought in the lights. Our generator then was less than 1 kV in capacity. That gen could not power any of his equipment. Tajuddin had to plead with me that I should follow him to one of his production houses. We went there, and then we did the shoot, which was assumedly my office speaking to the world about what we'll do. And today, sometimes when I look back at that, I laugh, I joke about it.
In 2016, I had gone to South Africa to campaign with women, and the South African sisters were there to host us. They received us in the evening, and we were served something they called paf, which was, I think, a corn meal. You have to eat it with stewed chicken or beef, as you please. So they won. We ate paf. It was really funny to me, and it was new. Basically, I was eating it for the first time that way, and so dinner was great. We ate paf for dinner. We ate paf for breakfast the next day, and we ate paf for lunch and supper again. Like 4 times in a row, they served us paf again. At this time, I had to scream like, if you guys serve me paf one more time, I'm just going to throw up and I'm not going to eat it. Because it was becoming a nightmare and somebody had to intervene. Then it wasn't funny because I was wondering like, why do you eat paf for breakfast, lunch, dinner? And then the next day you start all over again, you're eating paf for breakfast, lunch. They were ready to continue going. Every meal had paf. But where they had to ask me what I wanted and some other sisters what they wanted, and we were said. But then it wasn't funny. But now I look back and I think about it and I said, Ruth, you will never forget PAF. As activists, that's what we do. As we travel around the world campaigning, we try different food, and PAF was one of them for me. That wasn't easy at all. But now I look back and it makes me laugh.
It's 1978, it was in Geneva. I was at the Palais des Nations attending civil society meetings. What I really wanted to do was go across from the Palais to a brand new UN building, which was the property of the World Intellectual Property Organization, the bad guys that have got patents and trademarks and copyright, and especially they have UPOV, the Plant Breeders' Rights Convention there. They were negotiating or renegotiating their whole treaty to make it bigger. And I wanted them to at least know that we were watching them and they should be concerned that we were paying attention to what they were doing. So at a break, I headed off out of the building, across to the Palais, or to the WIPO building, and found that I had to cross what I thought was going to be a lawn, which turned into a big pile of mud because it was pouring rain outside, and there I was in my nice homemade suit, polyester, and guaranteed not to stain, not to do anything except for be washable, so that was good. Headed out towards across the mud in the rain to the staircase, and found that the staircase wasn't really quite a staircase. It was the two sides of the staircase, very, very wide, like many feet apart, but no steps in between them. Well, at that point, I had no choice. I wasn't going to go back through the mud, so I just headed up the side of the staircase as carefully as I could. Before long, I realized there was noise below me, and it was cars. It was the cars from the driveway leading into the underground parking of the building, which was a bit unnerving. But I kept on going up, got to this, what I thought was a patio at the top, which was kind of a mess, but that was fine. I thought, well, I'm there. And the big glass building was there, and I thought there's got to be a doorway, so I went up to the building, and there was no doorway. There were people inside, they were typing at desks and stuff like that, but they weren't paying attention to me, and there wasn't a doorway. So I followed along the side of the building as best I could, and at the edge of the building there was kind of a narrow little staircase that went up a little bit higher, not very far, and then turned a corner. Well, it's got to be a fire escape or something, I'll go that way. So I headed up the narrow little staircase, turned the corner, and found that instead of being a few feet above the ground, I was now several stories above several floors above the ground. I'm not sure, 5-7 stories above. And that was a bit scary, but I kept on going along the wall saying there's just got to be a way into this building. I found at one point there's a bunch of guys who seemed to be inside in their suits having coffee, talking to each other, and I pounded on the glass. And the guy was leaning against the wall, turned around, and poured his coffee all over himself. Because from their perspective, I was like Spider-Man. Out there in the middle of space, hanging out in space above the Geneva skyline, staring at them, trying to get in. Well, they were nice enough at least to try to lead me towards what they thought was a fire escape door, which is still more precarious, but I got to the door and neither of us could get the door open. It was impossible. It also turned out, by the way, the guy who poured the coffee all over himself was a guy named Wilf Bradnock, who was really the Darth Vader of Plant Breeders' Rights. He'd been the civil servant in the UK who got the legislation passed in the UK. Then he'd been moved to Canada to do the same thing in Canada, and he and I had fought many times over the years already. Anyway, I couldn't get in. I finally went down the staircase again, got around, not the whole staircase, the narrow little one, got to the edge of the building, the far edge of the building. There was a bunch of bushes there, and I thought, well, I'll just go through that, went through that, got around to the front of what was turned out to be the front of the building, got inside again, and got to, I was met there and went and joined these guys for coffee, who were quite amazed to see me and not that happy to see me, I must say, especially Wilf, who had coffee all over himself. I was asked right away, of course, what was I doing there, and I said, well, we're watching. And he said, well, how did you know we were going to be exactly here and at this time? And I said, well, we have spies everywhere, which I kind of enjoyed saying. And they believed me, and it was partly true. It was kind of hard to have the conversation because someone was following me with a mop and pail wherever I went. I was just, everything was piles of water around me. Anyway, they got through that. That evening, I was back at the John Knox Center, washing my suit out in the sink of the John Knox rooms, and with the confidence and comfort of knowing that Wilf Bradnock was somewhere in Geneva in a much fancier hotel, trying to figure out what to do with his very dark stained suit from all the coffee.
So mine is a short but funny story. During one of my earliest travels from Nigeria, I think that was around 2018. I was in Kenya, and I knew the time difference, right? That East Africa was two hours ahead of Nigeria time, and I didn't remember. I think what happened was I didn't remember that the time on my phone had changed. But then it was the same time with Nigeria on my laptop. So I cannot explain exactly what had happened, but what I can tell you is that I did set an alarm, but I couldn't wake up when I needed to wake up, and so what woke me up was a knock on my door saying, "Joyce, where are you? Are you okay?" The meeting had started to. I got into the meeting hall and everybody was looking at me like. So it was. I mean, at that time it wasn't funny. It was embarrassing. But now I think back and I can laugh because those were learning curves for me, and now I'm very, very conscious of the time. I would check and double check, when I'm setting my alarm to be sure that I wake up at the right time. So yeah.
There are a lot of frightful moments in my life, which looking back today are quite hilarious. And I want to share one of them. I lived at refinery quarters as a very young man, and we walked daily from the refinery quarters to our school at Ibulia, about 4 kilometers. We walked on top of pipelines, on top of naked oil and gas pipelines, because we considered it a little safer there than on the main roads. Then, of course, back at the school, behind our school, was the refinery jetty as well. And so every day we had ships coming to take crude oil, and of course their horns were so loud and were distracted. But this particular day, I went out with a friend of mine to do what we normally do as children, hunting and playing and plucking of fruits. And it was around January, February, and the Harmattan wind was blowing cold and dry. And so for whatever reasons, I lit a match and started a small fire, which became an inferno, a real forest fire. But then got the pipeline to the point where the refinery fire service had to send about 12 firefighting vehicles with long hoses to try to arrest the fire. Of course, we got so frightened we had to run. We took a bush path, to the quarters, and everyone gathered. And of course, we were afraid that the pipelines were going to burst, and then parents may be sacked, and all of that. People suspected who may have caused the fire. The attention didn't come to us. It went to another young friend of ours called Michael Jack. But the truth is that he didn't start the fire. And looking back today, I cannot be a thing funny. And the fact that one was so frightened, having caused a fire in the scale of economic sabotage.
What happened to me in the course of my work that was not funny then, but now, when I remember it, I laughed. I traveled to Zimbabwe for a program for GMAC event. I have a space to speak as a rural community farmer. And prior to the time I was asked, I wanted to ease myself on going out. I wasn't with my phone, I wasn't with anything, just for me to use myself. I was stuck in elevator. That I was in elevator till my time passed. So it wasn't there, but when I remember it now, I sweated as if I want to die that day.
I experienced that was not funny then, but now looking back, it seemed to be very funny. That was in 2009. In October precisely, also I was embarking on the 3-nation tour, Paris 1 week, Switzerland, 15 cities in Switzerland 1 week, and then the Netherlands 1 week. So before then, I've been traveling around African countries, Cameroon, Ghana, here, there. That was my first trip to Europe, and that was the first time I was traveling alone, and that was the first time I was to travel from Port Harcourt on an international flight. So I've been going through the domestic week, and so I don't carry my bag. I went there. It was very early December. On my boarding pass, we were board by 8. So I got there after 6 or so. I then decided to stay outside. I said, let me don't relax. I kept my bag. I sat down, I was relaxing. There was so much traffic in Port Harcourt. I made sure was building road up and down. So I sat down. Then small time, I fell asleep. Then somebody woke me up. Said, my friend, we are closing. What are you doing here? What happened? I said, I'm traveling to Paris. Where? Paris? And you are here. This is domestic week. Let's go to international. I said, where is international? He jacked my back on his head. I was running after him. I said, I want to see my back. I was running after him, He took me to that place. And they were packing up their roll of banana, their food, their gate, everything. I said, what happened? And narrated this. And I said, I was here very early, but I didn't know that the international week is here. And they started calling people back, and then they called the security men to open my back. Another program. I brought banners of Kensaro. What are you going to do with Kensaro? Something outside and another trouble. I said, it's campaign. We are going for campaign. And I was a spokesperson to Amnesty International in their AGMs. So I was going actually on an invitation by Amnesty International. So I got there, got to Paris. My bag, I didn't know where to go and pick my luggage. Now, I moved everywhere. I was asking people questions. Nobody talked to me. Until finally I found my way to the luggage pick up. Only my bag was blue. Only my bag. So I picked my bag. The man that came to carry me, the man was tired of waiting. He had gone to it. He came back and saw my name with him. Very patient man. So let's go by. So looking back now, I said, what was I actually doing outside sitting with my bag when I arrived at the airport very early? Was I waiting for the pilot to come and beg me and put me on the plane? Or what actually, was it ignorance or stupidity? Or what? I don't exactly know how to describe what happened. And when I got to Europe, to Paris, what happened that I didn't know where to go and pick my bag. So looking back at all those things now, it looks very funny. And there have been several instances that I've had very funny experiences, but then I didn't know that I will look back and laugh at them. They were all learning processes. That's what life is about.